In this video, we're going to talk about linear equations and particularly what they are. And you can check out the next video in this playlist that discusses how you can solve any linear equation. So basically, when we're looking at linear equations, we have to review what we learned in Algebra 1 by starting off with what a variable is. So a variable is just you can use a symbol to represent a variable. Basically what a variable is, it's a quantity that can change depending on what value you want to plug in for that variable. So let's look at a few examples of some variables. So x is a variable. This is the most common variable. So whenever you have something like y equals x, x is a variable because you can change what you set for the value of x. So you can say x is equal to 1, x is equal to 2. You make that decision. And so you're varying the value of this. Or another variable could be y. So oftentimes you'll see something like y equals something x. Basically what that says is by changing this value of x, you're changing the value of y. So that's why we call these variables, because they vary. So you're not only limited to x and y, you could have any different letter. So you could have something like a, that could be a variable. Something like k, that could also be a variable. Now typically it's not going to be a variable because typically k is used to represent a constant, but that's not always the case. So you could have something absurd be a variable, so like a smiley face could be a variable. Basically, all a variable is, it's a quantity that can change depending on what you're putting into it. So now let's talk about constants. Constants are the opposite. Constants, they maintain the same value. So the value of the constant does not change over time. It can only be a certain value. So a constant could be something like 1, or it could be something like pi, or something like e, which you'll learn more about in the rest of the Algebra 2 playlist. But these are all basically, they're numbers, right? They're not symbols. Basically what this says is there's only one value that you can associate with the constant. It's not going to change, so you can't say, oh, 1 is equal to 2, right? Because 1 is always going to be equal to 1. Variables, on the other hand, they can change. So if you want to say, we'll make a equal to 1, you can do that, and then you can change the value of the variable. So these are constants, and typically in an equation we'll see them denoted by something like c or something like k. But once again, k, you can also have that as a variable. C, you can also have that as a variable. But typically, whenever you see something like c or k, it's going to be used as a constant. Although just keep in mind that they can be used as variable. So we've talked about variables and constants. Now what is an expression? An expression is basically a combination of a variable and a constant. So you could pick any variable. So you could say, I don't know, let's go with x. You could square x, and then you can add in a constant. So like pi x squared. This is an expression because it's only variables and constants, combination. You can also have something like 4 minus, I don't know, 16y. This is an expression because you have a constant here and then you have a variable. So you're only using constants and variables. And so you could also have something like pi over x squared because pi is your constant, x is your variable, and once again you're only using a constant and a variable. So that's why that would be an expression. And what are equations then? Well, equations are where you say that two expressions are equal. So you could have something like pi x squared equals 4 minus 16y. And this is an equation because we have an expression here, pi x squared. We have another expression here, 4 minus 16y. And by saying that they're equal, we're basically suggesting that this is an equation. Equate, you see that there's an equate in the word equation. You're just saying that two expressions are equal to each other. And so the topic of this video is linear equation. So what is a linear equation? What's different between that and just any other equation? Well, a linear equation is of this form. ax plus b equals 0. Now you're not going to always see it like this. You might see it like x plus 2 equals 5, and instead of a 0, it's a 5. But the thing is, you have to realize that you can get the 5 onto the side with ax plus b, and basically in any linear equation, you'll be able to get it to a form where it looks like this. So this is a general way to describe any linear equation. And so a is your coefficient, so that's a constant term, x is your variable, and b is another constant term that's just by itself. And this is a linear equation because you notice that x, it's just raised to the first power. You don't have something raised to a different power. It's just x to the 1. That's the highest power. And so this is why it's a linear equation. Another way you could think about this is if you have something like a coordinate axes, for example. So let's say we're drawing the x and y axes, so x, y. Whenever you have a linear equation, your graph is going to look something like this because it's a line. So b is this value right here, a is the slope. And so basically for any linear equation, just remember that you can draw a graph that fits through the equation that is a line, and that the highest degree, which is the highest power in the equation, that's 1. So now let's talk about the 3 steps for solving any linear equation. The first step that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to simplify. Simplify as much as possible. Simplify as much as possible. And the reason is you might not see that in a given problem. You might not see that your equation is linear because there might be a few extra terms that are on both sides that are trying to trick you, I guess. But that's why you want to simplify. So you might want to factor, distribute, multiply out the terms, because using that you'll be able to get the equation into something that looks more like a linear equation. And the second step would be to isolate your variables. So we're going to talk about this more in the next video, but basically when you're isolating your variables, you're getting all the variables on one side, so the x's and the y's, you're getting all those on one side, and you're getting the constants, like 4, on the other side. And once you do this, you get something that looks like ax plus b equals 0, or ax equals negative b. And so the final step that you want to do is just do a final simplification. And what this does is you'll be able to easily recognize that you're solving for a variable. So you're solving for x or you're solving for y. And in that case, you want to divide both sides by a constant term. And once again, we'll talk more about this in the next video. But basically with the final simplification, you're able to express something like, well, your final answer would be something like variable equals some constant. And if this seems confusing to you right now, I would suggest that you look at the next video in the playlist. So by utilizing these 3 steps, you'll be able to solve pretty much any linear equation, and we'll talk more about solving them in the next video. So thanks for watching.